Hello, and welcome to Grade.com Talks With. Today, we're talking with Gary Oppenheimer, founder and executive director at Ampleharvest.org, a nonprofit organization that uses technology to end food waste and hunger, reduce malnutrition, and help the environment in America by educating and empowering millions of gardeners to easily find a local food pantry, eager for their surplus garden bounty. And if you're new to our podcast, please press subscribe button either on YouTube or your podcast app, because today we're going to learn about an organization that is helping gardeners eliminate food waste, malnutrition, and hunger in their own communities. Hello, Gary. Welcome to Grade.com Talks With. We're excited to have you here.
I'm thrilled to be with you. Thank you very much. It's nice to be chatting with you and all of your listeners.
Wonderful. How would you describe Ampleharvest.org to someone who is not familiar with your work?
I'm going to start by saying it's unlike any other program. And what we are not is almost as important as what we are. So let me start with what we're not. We're not a food bank. We're not a gardening program. We're not a gleaning program. We don't teach people how to cook, and we don't teach people how to garden. So now that I've taken all of those off the table, I can tell you what we are. We're a program in the United States. We work in all 50 states in more than 4,200 communities to educate gardeners, not farmers, but gardeners, about their opportunity to donate their surplus harvest to a nearby food pantry. And we enable the food pantry to receive that excess food without needing to buy extra refrigeration and storage. And the result is that when the gardener has grown too many tomatoes or zucchini or anything else that they've grown, for the first time they are able to connect with the food pantry in their own neighborhood, donate that surplus. The food goes to that food pantry, and hours later, it's on the dinner table at a hungry family. So what we really are solving is the information problem the gardeners have had. They were misinformed because they used to be told they couldn't donate, and they had lack of information as to where to donate it. We solve hunger and food waste. We treat it as an information problem, not a food problem.
Mm-hmm. So you are a bridge between the gardeners and food pantries who are helping hungry families across the United States. That's
a very good description, yes. And the important thing is we don't receive the food. We're bridging the two of them together, and then we get out of the way. And this is very important because it's what makes Ampleharvest.org a sustained solution. This is not about, let me get the tomatoes from your garden and get it to hungry people today, and tomorrow we have to do that again. Once you know that you can donate food and to where and when, you'll do that for the rest of your gardening life. We're orchestrating a wholesale transition in food waste and hunger in America without with no logistics on our part, which means eventually Ampleharvest will have connected millions and millions of gardeners to most of the food pantries in America, and we're no longer needed.
So you connect the bridge, and then the action is taken between those two. The connection is there between those gardeners and food pantries, and they can connect independently without you interfering anymore.
That's exactly.
That's
yes.
Incredible.
And it's really, let me say this, it is, I'm sorry?
Go ahead.
It is not terribly different from people who donate old clothing to a thrift shop. Mm-hmm. When they have this extra clothing, they take it to the thrift shop. There's nobody in the middle working that out. It's simply how they do it because that's what good people do. And when that clothing gets to a thrift shop, a person who needs a coat can get it. This is the same principle behind Ampleharvest.org. We're tapping into the passion of the gardeners to do good and the produce in the garden with which they can do the good.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe a food pantry for someone who is not familiar with the terminology and what does it represent?
That's a wonderful question. In the United States, the linguistics are kind of important. So I'm going to take it a step back. We have 200 food banks in America, In 48 out of our 50 states, a food bank is a large industrial warehouse. Hungry people don't go to it. It's simply where corporations and government get food to. And then we have about 33,500 food pantries across America. That's a place where a hungry family goes to 70% of the time. It's in the basement of a house of worship. They go to the food bank to get the food. They bring it back to the food pantry, and the hungry families get the food. The two exceptions, just to make things more fun, the state of Oregon and the state of Washington, what we call a food pantry in the rest of America, they also call a food bank. So the language differs slightly depending upon what state you're in, but basically food pantries where hungry families go.
Mm-hmm. So food pantry is a resource, is a place where people who are suffering from hunger, families who are suffering from hunger can go and get the produce and the products they need to feed their families. That's incredible.
Absolutely.
How big of an issue of hunger is in America?
Wow. It's big, and it's worse since the pandemic started. Right now, the estimates are around 48, maybe 50 million people in the United States the common use word is hunger. Maybe the better used word is what we call food insecurity. You may not be starving, but you may not have enough food for your next meal. That's where the term food insecurity comes from. Another problem we have in the United States is that millions of people who can't afford healthier food end up getting unhealthy food. So obesity affects half of the people in the United States. The reality in the United States is that we are actually not so much a hungry nation as an exceedingly malnourished nation. Mm-hmm. The idea behind Ampleharvest.org is when fresh fruits and vegetables from a nearby garden can get to the food pantry and then get to a hungry family, they have a chance to offer their family the healthiest possible food rather than the jars and cans and boxes that are packaged with extra salt or extra sugar or extra fat, which means the amount of obesity, the amount of diabetes, the amount of hypertension, etc., can start to go down. I was on a video call with the Secretary of Agriculture earlier this week, and he had pointed out that the obesity problem is so bad in America that obesity and diabetes, he was actually talking about diabetes at that moment, it's so bad that it's costing the nation $160 billion per year to help to treat the people with the diabetes. We can lower the obesity, which lowers the diabetes, which lowers the nation's healthcare costs. It's a win-win all the way around.
Mm-hmm. The numbers are shocking. Every second American is in some way or form is struggling from malnutrition and obesity, and the government, you mentioned, that is spending tons of money on the effects of it rather than the causes. Effects are diabetes being the fact, and how is the government is trying to help to prevent the causes rather than the effects?
Wow, that's a loaded question. Historically, I want to take a step backwards. Historically, the government and corporations worked to get surplus food to food banks and then to food pantries. Surplus food, I'm not talking about garden produce, I'm talking about factory food and store food. Surplus food was often the food of the lowest quality. In other words, you might want to buy food that is low in calories or low in fat or maybe no high fructose corn syrup, for example, or low in salt. That's your choice if you want to be healthier. The lower quality food may be manufactured with a lot of fat or a lot of sugar or a lot of salt. Well, in the effort to reduce the hunger, more of the food that came into the food bank system was the lower quality food, the less healthy food. It was perfectly edible, please don't get me wrong. But if you were health conscious, it might not be what you would have chosen for your family. Now, the current administration under President Biden and now the Secretary of Agriculture, Vilsack, are seriously focused on trying to get healthier food to hungry families, and that's exactly what the nation needs. But in the past, it was mostly let's feed people rather than instead of let's nourish them. So in effect, we were very exceedingly well fed but malnourished nation.
Mhm. So historical actions of the previous generation has led for people to being less hungry, yet not getting enough nutrition that they need for sustainable and healthy life. And food pantries come in here, as well as your organization trying to connect gardeners who trying to provide fresh food pantries, and those fresh food is getting to the families who need them and getting them to get enough nutrition that they need. Can you please
Absolutely.
Can you please describe how do you connect gardeners and food pantries?
It takes a lot of work. So let me tell you the two parts of Ampleharvest.org, because these are the two parties. So on the food pantry side, we have a team that's working all the time to have more and more food pantries join Ampleharvest.org. Mm-hmm. Once a food pantry is a part of Ampleharvest.org, our work shifts. How do we find the gardeners? There's no one way to find gardeners. Before the pandemic, America had 42 million gardeners. Now it is 62 million gardeners. That's a huge number of people, but people like gardening, and they have a backyard or maybe a community garden, and they grow tomatoes or they grow whatever they want to grow. In the past, a whole lot of that food went to waste. So our role is to use education. We use Google's AdWords. We use social media. We use traditional media. We do podcasts like this, many, many, many different ways to try to help gardeners learn that the solution to hunger is in their backyard, that they can donate the surplus food they grew to a food pantry. So once a gardener has heard the message and then they wake up one morning to too many zucchini or too many tomatoes or anything else, they visit Ampleharvest.org and they find one of nearly 9,000 food pantries. They find one right in their own neighborhood, and then they connect to the food pantry. We, in effect, are a search engine for all of America's food pantries. As a matter of fact, Google's our biggest partner. Google's been helping us now for 11 years, and we're very grateful to that. And we also work with a very important partner in the gardening space, a company called Bonnie Plants. That's the largest supplier of seedlings in America to gardeners. And so Bonnie Plants helps us reach more gardeners, and Google has been helping us, basically helping to support the search engine work that we do. So this is an entirely cloud-based solution introducing these two together. But I will tell you, finding a gardener is no easy task because it's your hobby. It's like if you play chess. Who knows you're playing chess? You and your friends. There's nothing in the media, the government doesn't know, nobody else knows, so you have to find many ways to get on the radar of somebody who enjoys playing chess in their home. It's the same thing with gardeners. I'm trying to find a young man who grows peppers, an older woman who's growing something else. There's no one way to find them all, and it's an ongoing effort. And our work is just to reach as many people as possible who have dirt under their fingernails.
Mm-hmm. The fact that during the pandemic time, the number of people gardening increased by 50%, that's such a revealing number. And with the growing gardening, people with growing their own gardens, you mentioned there's also an issue of growing of food waste. And then you try to connect those gardeners, in such way that that food that is a surplus in their harvest, so they can donate to food pantries. I can recall from my own experience. I grew up in a home with a big garden, and each summer we would have excess harvest of apples, excess harvest of grapes, and we had to look for people in our neighborhood who needed those food, and it was such a hassle hassle for us to go and like find 10 families and deliver them individually. However, if there was a solution like Food Pantry, if there was a solution with, such as Ampleharvest.org, who could connect us to the Food Pantry, we could just deliver them all in one, and then they could take the simplicity of logistics and do it for themselves. And it's such a great solution to have for gardeners. And I applaud that you are helping the gardeners as well as the people who are suffering from hunger and malnutrition.
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words. It is it's something that the gardeners really wanted. They were always told, in the United States at least, that they weren't allowed to donate food. Every time you went to a food drive to donate food from your kitchen, they always said the exact same thing: jars, cans, boxes, no fresh food. Mm-hmm. And that's what I fixed. And I fixed that by effectively Uberizing the food system. Now, I'm stealing a term because we didn't have Uber 11 years ago, in the United States at least. But that's effectively what happened, is to help the gardeners learn that they can donate and to where to donate. And then from the rest of the gardening life, they're able to donate that food.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about the effects of your work? Some numbers, how many families are you helping with the help of gardeners to feed? How their life is, how the life of those people who are suffering from malnutrition and hunger is changing by the work that your organization does?
Let me take a step and point out that we don't touch the hungry people per se. So what we get is anecdotal and when people write to us, but it's not that we actually get the food directly to them. But the feedback that we get, particularly from the food pantries who give that food to the hungry families, is the hungry families deeply appreciate it. And it's having a significant impact. We know that because let me put it this way, we do studies every 2 years. And then we have outside economists and statisticians analyze the data. A gentleman, a Harvard-trained gentleman who used to be with Cisco Systems, took our data in 2016. And he figured out that if all the gardeners in America knew they could donate food, and all the food pantries in America were connected, it means if we reach that end goal, the nation's healthcare costs would drop $58 billion a year. That was in 2016. We have millions more gardeners now, so we know the impact has grown and continues to grow. We also, by the way, this year for the first time because of the pandemic, we are inviting gardeners to actually deliberately grow more just for donation if they have the space in their garden. Last year, I added 120 square feet to my garden just for donation. Mm-hmm. By the way, the average gardener in America grows 270 pounds more food per year than they can grow, meaning all of the gardeners together in America collectively grow 11.4 billion pounds of surplus food, and that's enough to feed 28 million people. Mm-hmm. Wow. The numbers are huge. The opportunity is huge, and this costs the gardener nothing. And it costs the community nothing because the gardener has already bought the packet of tomato seeds. I have never met a gardener who used every seed that came with the tomatoes or the cucumbers. There's always extra seeds. You said that you and your family had been gardening. Then you probably know that gardeners often plant a lot in the spring, and then suddenly everything is ready for harvest at the same time. And there's only so much that you could actually eat on your own. So you went out to find 10 families to donate to. And by the way, I applaud you. That's a wonderful thing to do. In the United States, the problem is that if I walk down the street and give somebody food from my garden, in theory, if they have a bellyache, they could sue me. Mm-hmm. However, the law in the United States says if I give the food to an NGO, to a nonprofit like a food pantry, and the food pantry then gives it to somebody else, they can't sue me. It's what we call the Good Samaritan law. And President Clinton put that in place in 1995. So the food the gardeners grow can be donated with no fear of anybody getting a bellyache, obviously, unless you do something deliberate. So we would tell people here in the States, don't give the food to people down the street like you did. We would say, give it to the food pantry, let them get it to the people who really, really need it.
Yeah, so you're taking the risk out of them of being legally sued.
Yeah, exactly. And again, this is United States law. How these things work in other countries, I can't express. And we only, by the way, we are only at work in the United States. We will not be expanding to other countries. However, we have shared this model with about a dozen other countries. Folks from South Africa, from England, Israel, Spain, Poland, India, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and others. And we spent time with them. This is what we did. This is how it works. These are the things we learned. Now make your own version in your country.
Wonderful. That's great that you're sharing your experiences as the role model to other countries who can learn and who can also implement those strategies in their own communities. You mentioned that there is an excess of 12 billion pounds of food grown by gardeners each year that could feed 28 million people. How do you see the number of gardeners growing in the upcoming 10 to 15 years and the excess food that they are producing, helping to eliminate hunger and malnutrition in America?
Well, the numbers I gave you were based on pre-pandemic numbers. So right off the bat, they're talking about 42 million gardeners. We now have 62 million gardeners. However, the industry thinks that after the pandemic, the number of gardeners will drop from 62 to 58 million. Mm-hmm. But that is still a lot more than the 42 million. So as those gardeners grow more and grow more, there'll be even more food. We're expecting more food to be available. By the way, I should say that the reason there was that sudden jump in gardening, I think, was twofold. One was in last spring in the United States when the pandemic was really getting bad, a lot of supermarkets ran low on food, and some people said they were getting nervous. Can I feed my family? They went out, they planted a garden, which meant you had a hard time finding seeds and a hard time finding plants to plant because everybody was sold out. But the other reason, and this is important, suddenly tens of millions of Americans were working from home. Mm-hmm. They were no longer wasting 10 hours a week driving to work and looking for parking. So when you're working from home, you have a chance, you have 10 hours a week that's new to your week, and you want to get outside, you want to get in the sun a little bit, you want to relax, you want to get away from Zoom for a little while, you go in your garden and you plant. So when the pandemic is over, some people will go back to work, but I think many, many millions of people are going to keep working from home, which means those people have the opportunity to continue the gardening. So we really believe that the numbers we had pre-pandemic, the 42 million gardeners, the 11.4 billion pounds of food, whatever those numbers are growing to, they're going to be staying at the higher number. Right now, and you and I are talking now in, I guess it's mid-March 2021, we are doing a survey of gardeners across America. We do this every 2 years. And we're asking gardeners about their growing, how much they grow, et cetera. We hope to get data from this survey that will help us better understand what the long-term impact of the gardening community is going to be. Mm-hmm. I can promise you that whatever it is, the numbers are not going back to what they were. They will definitely be higher, which means more people gardening, more people getting vitamin D from being in the sun, and more hungry families getting wonderfully grown, locally harvested food for the rest of from the gardeners because of that connection in the community.
Great. So the future.
One of the few good things coming out of a pandemic.
So the future looks bright for gardeners and gardening industry in general, and it's bringing America one step closer to combating the hunger and fighting against malnutrition. If someone would like to support Ampleharvest.org, how can they do that?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. The most important thing you can do for Ampleharvest.org is support our work, make a contribution. If you are an individual, you visit Ampleharvest.org, you can donate whatever you're comfortable donating. And I want you to understand something. When you make a donation, you are not buying food that we're going to give to people. When you make a donation, that money helps us to find more food pantries and connect them to more gardeners on a permanent basis. So you may want to know what the impact of your donation is going to be. So I invite you to visit ampleharvest.org/impact. A team from the Harvard Business School Alumni Association, people who were super smart, put a 128-row spreadsheet together to calculate the impact. On that page, you will see only 12 rows of that, not 128. But if you put in a dollar amount, $5, $50, $500, you can see not only what the impact is this year, but what the impact is next year and for out to 20 years. So, for example, somebody who donates $100 to Ampleharvest.org, there's several hundred servings that will be given effectively to hungry people this year. But if you look out 20 years, over the 20-year period, you'll be approaching 1 million servings of food will have been donated. That's the impact of your donation. So why don't you just make a contribution? Secondly, we're always looking for businesses and corporations that want to partner with Ampleharvest.org. We've had wonderful partners. Bonnie Plants is a great one. Google is a great one. We've had many others. We're always looking for more that can help us with cause marketing. And we're also always looking for people with special talent, or whether they're in social media or public relations, that can help us make millions more people aware that they can donate the food. The most important thing is if you're a gardener, visit Ampleharvest.org, learn about donating, and donate. And even if you don't garden, find a gardener in your family, in your friends, in your neighborhood, and tell them about Ampleharvest.org. Everybody who learns about it becomes a vector to help other people, and the result is the number of people donating and the amount of food donated grows exponentially, and we reduce hunger and malnutrition on a sustained and sustainable basis.
Incredible. So all the links to Ampleharvest.org website will be provided in the link in the description. So thank you so much, Gary, for telling us about your organization, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure chatting with you. Really deeply appreciate it.
For you listening, if you enjoyed this conversation, please press like and share button, because this will show the YouTube algorithm and the podcast algorithm that this conversation is important. We need more attention to food hunger as well as malnutrition issue in the United States. Thank you so much, and see you in the next episode.